At 7:50 a.m. on the morning of August 9, 1945, air raid sirens echoed across the Japanese city of Nagasaki. Civilians hurried into shelters, bracing themselves for what they believed would be another conventional bombing raid. A short time later, the sirens sounded again, this time signaling the all-clear. Observers had reported only two American B-29 bombers in the sky, far too few for a major attack. The aircraft were assumed to be conducting a routine reconnaissance mission. People emerged from their shelters and returned to their daily lives. At 11:01 a.m., a single bomb was released over the city's industrial district. In an instant, Nagasaki was consumed by a blinding flash of light. The explosion unleashed the equivalent force of 22,000 tons of TNT. The blast was so intense it was seen by observers more than 100 miles away. A fireball formed, generating temperatures exceeding 3,900 degrees Celsius. Winds traveling at speeds of up to 600 miles per hour tore through the city, amplifying the devastation. Exact figures remain uncertain, but it is estimated that at least 129,000 people were killed, either on that day or from injuries and radiation sickness in the weeks and years that followed. 6 days later, Japan surrendered to the Allied powers. The most destructive conflict in human history had come to an end, marked forever by the first, and so far only, use of nuclear weapons in war. It was the Second World War. Understanding how the world descended into this catastrophe is impossible without examining the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany and its leader, Adolf Hitler. Hitler was born in Austria, but during the First World War he served in the German army. Germany's defeat left him deeply embittered. Like many Germans, he believed his nation had been humiliated. Unlike many others, he was also consumed by a fear of communism spreading westward from revolutionary Russia. In 1919, 1 year after the war ended, Hitler joined a small and obscure political organization known as the German Workers' Party. Possessing an extraordinary talent for public speaking, he quickly became its most effective voice, stirring anger, resentment, and national pride among his audiences. A year later, the party was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known today as the Nazi Party. By 1921, Hitler had risen to become its leader. His charisma and relentless propaganda drew growing numbers of supporters. In 1923, the Nazis felt confident enough to attempt a violent seizure of power in Munich. The failed coup, later known as the Beer Hall Putsch, resulted in Hitler's arrest. Rather than destroying his movement, the trial amplified it. Hitler used the courtroom as a stage, spreading his ideology to a national audience. Though sentenced to prison, he spent his time writing Mein Kampf *, a book that became both autobiography and manifesto. Within its pages, Hitler outlined his vision of Germany's future. He blamed the nation's suffering on what he described as subversive forces, particularly Jews and communists, and condemned the Treaty of Versailles, which had dismantled Germany's empire, disarmed its military, stripped it of territory, and imposed crippling war reparations. By 1933, the Nazi Party had gained enough political support for Hitler to legally become Chancellor of Germany. Once in power, he moved swiftly. Democratic institutions were dismantled. New laws transformed Germany into a totalitarian state. The swastika became the symbol of a reborn nation, while persecution of Jews, Roma, and political opponents became official government policy. Hitler believed Germany had a destiny, one centered on the supremacy of the so-called Aryan race, with himself as its unquestioned leader, the Führer. While history traditionally marks the beginning of the Second World War in 1939, some historians argue that its origins lie earlier, specifically in 1931, when Japan invaded Manchuria in northern China. Using a staged bombing of a railway line as a pretext, Japan accused Chinese dissidents and launched a full-scale invasion. The occupation that followed was brutal. Civilians were subjected to widespread murder and rape, often encouraged by Japanese military leadership. In northeastern China, a secret military unit, Unit 731, conducted horrifying experiments on thousands of civilians, developing biological and chemical weapons through human experimentation and surgical procedures carried out without anesthesia. Elsewhere, fascism was also on the rise. In 1922, Benito Mussolini and his National Fascist Party seized power in Italy. He reshaped the nation into a dictatorship and pursued dreams of empire. In 1935, Italian forces invaded Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, marking another step toward global war. Throughout the 1930s, Hitler's grip on Germany tightened. Many Germans credited the Nazi Party with restoring national pride and economic stability after years of despair. Abroad, foreign observers watched closely, some with admiration. In 1938, Hitler was named Time magazine's Man of the Year. Emboldened, Hitler began openly challenging the post-war order. In 1935, he reintroduced military conscription, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Britain and France protested, but took no action. Encouraged, Hitler sent troops into the demilitarized Rhineland in 1936. Again, the Allies did nothing. Germany continued to rearm. In 1938, German forces marched into Austria under the guise of restoring order. The country was absorbed into the Reich in an event known as the Anschluss. Hitler then turned his attention to Czechoslovakia, demanding control of the Sudetenland. At the Munich conference, Britain and France agreed to his demands, without Czechoslovakia even being present. Months later, Hitler seized the rest of the country. It was his first act of outright aggression against a sovereign state. In August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, secretly dividing Eastern Europe between them. With his eastern flank secured, Hitler ordered the invasion of Poland. On September 1, 1939, German forces crossed the border. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. What followed was a new kind of warfare. Blitzkrieg lightning war combined tanks, aircraft, and rapid movement to overwhelm enemies before they could respond. Poland fell in weeks. Western Europe soon followed. France collapsed in just 46 days. By the summer of 1940, Britain stood alone. Yet it refused to surrender. Over the skis of southern England, the Battle of Britain raged. Against overwhelming odds, the Royal Air Force held the line. Hitler's invasion plans were abandoned. The war spread across continents, into North Africa, the Atlantic, and the Balkans. Then, in June 1941, Hitler made his most fateful decision. He turned east. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, unleashed nearly 4 million Axis troops across a vast front. Initial successes were staggering, but the scale of the land, the resilience of Soviet resistance, and the brutal Russian winter halted the advance. Germany was now locked in a war it could not win. As snow fell on exhausted German soldiers outside Moscow, events thousands of miles away were already reshaping the conflict. Across the Pacific Ocean, a Japanese fleet moved silently toward an American naval base in Hawaii. The world was about to change forever.